Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Hi, Ashton.
Hey, Ayana.
Glad to be finally talking to you
I
on what
know.
is, maybe we can call it our inaugural discomfort club. Maybe that's what we should call it.
Okay.
So I'm glad that we could get together today because, like I said, it's a long time coming. I've been watching you for such a long time. I think maybe since 2015 or 2016, and just am such a fan of the work you're doing. And um, as it intersects with the work I'm doing, we both thought it was appropriate to have a conversation about ageism and racism and all the isms really. But you came up with the Discomfort Club. So I want us to maybe talk about why the Discomfort Club. And then let's just have a really good conversation. Of course, if you're watching live right now on LinkedIn, please let us know you're here. You can use the comments. Sometimes it's a little tricky for me to see them, but try it. Let us know where you're in from. And of course, if you have questions, the Discomfort Club doesn't happen because just Ashton and I are here. Please let us know your questions. So going back to the Discomfort
Don't be
Club.
afraid to ask a question that
Yes.
that you feel uncomfortable about raising in another context, because that really, and they're different for each of us, what those questions are.
Yeah. So please do. Definitely. So in thinking about why the Discomfort Club, I'll think about why the Discomfort Club for me and why I loved that you brought that up, the Discomfort Club. Because in the work that I'm doing and really advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and diversity in all of its ways, I think one of the reasons we have a really difficult time moving forward and actually engaging a more diverse workforce, for example, is because we do not have some of those conversations we need to have about bias and other things that really just keep us from moving forward. So that was one of my reasons. And I told you that as I think about age and ageism, I think about how it shows up in my own life. And so I also thought it was really good because I do not have the experience that you have yet. Right. And you certainly don't have the experience that I have as a Black woman. Right.
Right. I have a
So,
lot of experience being old, but zero experience being a Black person. But we have a lot of experiences together as women.
we
And
do.
yeah.
We do that intersect, right? And so that's why I thought the Discomfort Club was such a great name. So tell me why it was really important for you.
Well, I think the reason people get uncomfortable, especially in a professional setting, is we're afraid of getting it wrong. And of
Mm,
course, in a job situation, if your boss says something racist or ageist, you may not be in a position to say, hello, I don't think that's okay what you just did or said.
right.
But there is no getting it right. Everyone screws up. It's
Yeah.
iterative. I'm learning that. I will say right off the bat that the issue that makes you want to see me get uncomfortable when I talk about racism, because I
Mm,
am worried that I won't say it right, that I will say something that is offensive to a Black friend or ally, and so on. So I'm going to cheat
yeah.
right out the bat and read a passage from this book, White Women.
Ah, yes.
Everything you already knew about your own racism and how to do better. This book is aimed at white women. They say because if white men wanted to do something about racism, they woulda, because they have the most power. By
Okay.
Regina Jackson and Saira Rao. I hope that's how you pronounce it, and we can put all this in the notes after. Quote, the pain and hurt and discomfort of thinking about this stuff are not ancillary to anti-racism work. They are the guts of it. Without them, change simply does not happen. Sitting in this discomfort, a feeling you likely haven't endured before, is ultimately what will break these systems of oppression. Think about it like this. If you walk into a pond, you stir up dirt in the process, and it gets cloudy. Keep moving. It gets cloudier. You say, oh, the water's cloudy. It's scary. I don't know what's underneath. So you run back to the shore. What if you were to walk into the water and stand there and be still? It's uncomfortable at first, but the water becomes clear because you're still after a few moments. So, too, if you are willing to just be still amid murkiness and discomfort so profound that you feel pained, you will eventually be able to to clearly see the systems that are meant to be invisible, rigid and reinforced, but invisible. You'll be able to see these systems of oppression and violence. Most important, you'll be able to see how you are upholding them. You cannot change what you don't see. Seeing is foundational. Now,
Yes.
I'm right now because I have learned the hard way that it is a mistake to compare different forms of oppression. And I also have learned and believe very firmly that racism deserves our special attention because of the uniquely ugly way it is embedded in American history. So
Yes.
I'm wondering whether it's okay to say that what these women are saying about racism as women of color is okay to say these systems also invisibly enforce ageism, enforce ableism, enforce sexism, and we
Yes.
can't challenge bias unless we're aware of it, and it's all
Yes.
uncovered. So there, I just did the thing I'm supposed to not do.
Okay, but you did the thing and the thing works. And I'm glad that you did the thing how you did it. And I'll say at the end, I want you to hold that book up again because I know that you can follow both of these women on LinkedIn. So yeah, so what was really interesting is I like the imagery of stepping into murky water, right? And yeah, we got to wade in and not be afraid because the thing is the reason why we are still even having these conversations in 2023, the reason why I am working on relationships with white women, although I have many white women in my life and I am working on relationships, okay, is because we don't talk about the stuff that needs to be talked about. And I think ageism is a part of that conversation and we can do many things at once. It doesn't have to be a competition, right? Let's talk about ageism first.
Right,
Let's tackle
especially with
ableism.
age, everyone is aging. That is an
Right,
identity that everyone has, and it ought
right,
to provide a common ground. Not that you don't have to be the same age to experience
right,
moving through life.
right, right. So that's the thing, right? But I think we have to talk about all of these things at once because they intersect. So if you are experiencing ageism, experience what your life is like if you are experiencing ageism and racism. You know what I mean? So I think as women, we have a duty to one another in the name of sisterhood to learn each other because we don't know each other. We don't. And so that's why I was so excited that you and I were having this conversation because, again, I was saying how our experiences are different. And I was even yesterday talking about today, right? And I was like, oh my goodness, I need to dye these gray hairs. And then I'm like, I feel terrible sometimes. Now I'm being kind to myself. All right. All the time I'm being kind to myself because I'm perpetually learning. But sometimes I feel bad about number one, being really adamant that we need to be fighting ageism, but also I partake in it. Right. Why do I care if my hair is
We all
turning gray?
do.
Because I covet youth. That's why. And I'm working on it. So,
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of forces out there that want you to be afraid and want you to loathe the gray and want you to be scared. There's
yeah.
a professor, Amos Wilson says, if you want to understand any problem in America, don't look at who suffers from it. Look at who profits from it.
That
The
part.
beauty industry, all the hair dye people.
Yeah.
If we all looked at our bodies and our hair and went, looking pretty good today, don't need to do anything, people would lose a lot of money.
Yeah. So we talked about how we shouldn't ask me. Well, you said you have a really radical friend yesterday.
Yeah, I
Who,
have. I mean, the gray hair thing comes up and up and up and up. And
yes,
every time anything about gray hair gets so many more likes and mentions and comments than something really serious about combating
yeah,
racism, which
right,
kind of makes me crazy.
yeah,
So I have made a personal vow not to forward or comment on stuff because they're that have to do with women's appearances, even if it's to say
mhm,
this is crap and we shouldn't do this. First of all,
yeah,
avoid should.
yeah.
But
Okay, that
every
makes
time we engage in a conversation like this, we reinforce the idea that our appearance is the most important thing about us. And this radical friend of
sense.
mine, I refuse in my professional life to tell women what we should or shouldn't say or do or behave, because there's so many
Mhm.
forces out there, from beauty industries, from patriarchy and capitalism itself. So
Yeah.
I'm really trying hard not to be one of them. You do you. I'll do
Yeah.
me. And if I want to bleach my hair white, which I did at one point, or dye it black or whatever, that's what I chose to do, and it makes me feel best in the world right now. Right?
Yeah.
Nothing about it.
Period.
This friend of mine, though, she won't even say you look good. She will not
Yes, you
let
said
a
that.
single, and that's such a habit. You want to say, "Hey, love the hair," or whatever. What a cute suit. Even if it's not like you look so young, right? And I think that's a really radical idea, but a tough habit to break. What do you think?
It is a tough habit to break. Because sometimes I feel like we say things in small talk, right? Which I'm also learning maybe I'm terrible at small talk because I'm always trying to get deep.
Not my
Terrible at it.
forte.
I'm working at it. But
I
when
don't
you
know.
said that,
I don't think that needs to be at the top of your list, Diana, but go
well, not
on.
at the top. Not at the top. But yeah, I thought about how you said your friend was really radical and she's just like, don't comment on how women look at all. And I think about how I am probably a lot kinder to other women than I am about myself. Because remember, I was really like, oh my goodness, I gotta do something with these grades. And then I was feeling terrible. And then the other thing that came up in our conversation was the word mature. When we were talking about when we were talking about again just our differences, and how again I am looking to older women, lots of older women, really in awe and also in expectancy, because I don't look at getting older as something that is bad. I look forward to it. I feel like the older I get, the better I get in many ways. But I talked to you yesterday about how you might be more mature, or how I like to talk to women that were more mature, and you were like, "Ugh, gross." That's not my word. So tell me about what we talked about when we were discussing mature.
you know, Part of this is just personal. The word mature, I don't know, it sounds like some sort of 1950s ad for, I don't know, dentures or upholstery covering or something. There's just some connotation to it.
The
That's
mature
what
woman.
the mature woman. But the more fundamental reason why, and I think what I said to you is, you don't need to use mature describing me. It's okay to
Yeah,
say I'm older or
yeah,
even old. I mean, I just hit 70.
yeah,
If there's more road behind you than ahead, you are not young, and you might even be old. That said, a lot of people don't want to be identified as old, and they're not ready, but most people will identify as older. So I use older a lot. Mature just seems to me to be a workaround, a way to avoid a word that should not have negative or positive connotations. Now you could throw that back at me and say, then why do you call yourself older? Why don't you go with old? And there's an analogy there to the way LGBTQ people, queer used to be an insult or
yeah,
dyke. And you
yeah.
can reclaim that, or the use of the N-word and in rap and stuff like that. If you are a member of that
Yeah, 'cause everybody can't do it. Like, I'm not gonna go
culture
around saying certain stuff. Yeah, right.
on your own terms. So
Yeah,
I got no problem with old, and I often describe myself as old, in fact, but I don't, and a really good rule of thumb in all these contexts, as I'm sure you know better than I, is ask people what they want to be called. What are your
yeah,
pronouns? What do you know? Oh, if you don't, what would you rather I call you? Sorry, I didn't mean to ruffle your feathers. What do you
yeah,
prefer? And then try and remember the answer, the hard
yeah,
part. But I like older because it emphasizes that we age in relation to others. A 4-year-old will assure you that she is older than
right.
her 3-year-old sister. So I even use them as nouns, olders and youngers, in my
Okay.
speech and in my
Older
book,
than you.
because you can be in this context, you're younger, but in another, you might be giving a talk at a university where you were the oldest person in the room. So it's not set. It depends on our context. It depends on who we are with, and it depends on how we relate to our age.
Yeah. I think all of that makes a lot of sense. I am thinking about all of the ways that I talk about age, um, my own, and maybe
Have you gotten
even
more comfortable? I mean, what can you talk
oh, yeah.
about at what point you became more, or was it
I
Did
don't
you
think
just
I ever
always
had an
listen to that?
issue.
You did.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had an issue. Like I really remember 30 and 40 really well. I just turned 44. And I remember having people in my life who were really like not happy about, especially 40. 40 was supposed to be big. I felt powerful. I felt mature. I did.
You do you.
So right. So I wasn't feeling bad about aging. I wasn't feeling down in the dumps about it at all. And I think part of the reason why, though, the older I get, the more conscious I am about the fact that my mother died young. My mother was 56 when she passed away, and I can see 56 now, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to see aging as something that's negative, because you hope. I hope to be a woman 100 plus with my grandkids, my great grandkids around me. My mother didn't get to do that, and neither did her mother. um so yeah, I think about aging very differently, but I am also very interested. We have so many people here. Thank you all for joining us.
Yay.
I want to hear what makes you all uncomfortable. What's your discomfort? We're talking about racism, we're talking about ageism, but honestly, we can talk about all of the isms because they are all piling on top of one another, and we can take care of all of them. You do not have to pick and choose. And I think that is what's really difficult for people to understand.
Really
So
important. And also that if you work against any form of prejudice, you are chipping away at the fear and ignorance that underlie them all. Right?
yes,
It's the sort of, if intersectionality is this very heavy, I almost feel like a physical weight of all these different systems of oppression weighing on different people, especially if you're not white and don't have money and are not thin and are not male and so on. But activism, advocacy is intersectional too. All our efforts
yes.
ricochet through the system.
And so we talked about sisterhood and how important that was, right?
Yeah.
And so you were very, again, just transparent in saying, yeah, racism is hard for me to talk about. But I think if we are proclaiming sisterhood, especially for women who love to remind you that they are feminist, if they are not talking about racism, if they are not talking about ableism, if they are not prioritizing, though, I'm saying racism, it's not the activism you think it is. It's
No,
and it's
because
not feminism. It's not. I'm just gonna
it's
say it. It's
not.
not.
I agree, because it comes at the expense of women with less privilege, and a brutal example that I write about, and they certainly write about in this book, is the fact that over half of white women voters voted in the last two presidential elections for someone who bragged about grabbing women by the pussy,
And
you
did.
know, and was an overt racist. But these women chose what I call, the shelter of patriarchy, the shelter of white privilege, which is huge, over solidarity
Yes.
with women who are not white. And we're never going to build a good world to be female in and to grow old in without white women, because we have so much power. Women are so powerful, right?
Yes.
But we have to unite against these things and check, like, who is this coming at anyone else's expense? Are you going off to work because a woman of color, perhaps an illegal immigrant, is at some level being exploited to care for your children and can't care for her own? I did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No judgment. I didn't think about it in those terms then. And I don't know what, my kids are big now. I don't know what I would do instead. No shame, no shade in any of this, but we need to talk about it.
And listen, so that's a discomforting part, right? Is we have to be willing to both learn and unlearn. And so in talking about folks who are undocumented, and in talking about other folks from marginalized communities, we have to take their lead. Believe people when they say their life experiences are different, and do not make excuses for it. Get in the murkiness, get up in it. And I call leaders out, especially leaders. Listen, empathy is a core competency, okay? It is. And folks are lacking. And so I think
Do you think that's gendered? Ayana, do you think, or is it just a personal temperament and men are as empathic,
I don't
or trans
I
people?
don't think it's gendered. I
Yeah,
don't. I
I
don't. I think
don't
that
want to, but I
yeah,
don't.
I think that all people are shitty in many instances.
Well,
Men,
and I think
women.
a patriarchal culture discourages signs of empathy in a man, and I have to think about what I mean. It exploits it in women. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yes, it does. But I'm also very aware, again, my experience in life is different, right? Some of the most kind people in the workplace to me have not been women.
I
Okay. Certainly not
know.
white women. They have been men. So
Yeah,
I
why?
think
That's a
about,
really, really underlying question: is why aren't women more generous to each other in the workplace? I have a short answer to that, but I would love to hear from people in the chat as well as
me
from
too.
you if there's a better one, which is that I think women compete. You know, we have fought our way into some standing in the professional and corporate world, but there's still this scarcity mentality. There's only, there's 10 men at the table and only 2 women, and
Yes.
forgive this heteronormative framework. So I got to compete with the 16 other women who want those 2 seats. And I think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was asked how many women she thought belonged on the Supreme Court, and she said 9.
Yeah.
Why are we fighting for 2 seats?
That's right.
Because then I was stuck for a while. You're right. We need half the seats. And then I heard that quote from Ginsburg. It's like, why stop at half? Men had all the seats for centuries.
For a long time.
Qualified men. This is not an anti-man statement. This is a pro-equity statement. The best person for the job. So I think if we come at it from more of an abundance mindset and see again that supporting, especially the people of whom there are fewer in the room, we all win in the long run. If you have to have a long view, and that's hard.
And listen, and you've got to be able to recognize and care that those people aren't in the room to begin with.
Notice that they're not there.
Yes. Okay. So we have lots of comments and all this stuff. And so
Great.
I'm trying to go through them at the same time.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to start on the bottom and I'm going to just sort of post some of the comments. Let me see. Let me see.
I hope you're not rewarding the latecomers.
Lori, I'll go back up to the top too. Lori says, we've been taught to compete with each other based on how we look since we were children. Yes, women.
No kidding.
Yeah. So yes, that scarcity mentality. And so when I'm doing workshops, I'm always, especially when I'm talking to women leaders, I think about, are you kicking the door closed? And if you say no, tell me how you're keeping it open. Don't just say yes. Tell me how. Tell me what that looks like. Yeah. And Lori also says, I mean, beauty pageants are fading, but they're still a thing. Yeah.
So imagine if we eliminated through our magic, witch girl power right now, all comments on the basis of appearance.
Yes.
That would be
it would be hard to do.
So
if
hard.
I'm being honest.
So hard.
Let me see. I want to put up another comment here. Berhinda says, yes, we have to address white feminism. Can we? Yes, we need to. Womanism looks at the whole. Elders are valued so much in indigenous cultures. Yes, they are. Again, I think it's because also we live, like you said, Ashton, in a capitalist society. And so if we can cash in on people's obsession with youth, why not do that?
Yeah. I have an awkward question.
Yeah.
I know. I start to stumble instantly. The clearly older Black women, I'm about to make a statement about all Black people, therefore it's racist, but we do see matriarchies in play in a lot of Black communities with older women, especially mothers, being held in high regard, in huge part because so many men are incarcerated because of entrenched racism. But what I want to know, and it came up earlier about your experience of looking forward to aging. Do you think that's different for you as a person of color? And now I'm committing the sin of asking a person of color to represent the experiences of all people of color. And this is the kind of wormhole.
Here's the discomfort.
These questions.
Okay, discomfort alert. Here it is. I don't know. We need some kind of buzzer. Discomfort alert. Number one, my experience is different. And yes, I do not speak for all Black people, right? My experience is different. To be honest, too, so I think as a whole, yes, the Black community uplifts Black women, their mothers, their grandmothers. But at the same time, our community and the world steps on us. The world is on my neck every day. Believe me when I tell you that. And I'm telling you this as a Black woman who is married to a white man. Okay, so when you talk about getting older and recognizing who you are and how you are and doing that in relationship with somebody who is inherently not like you, there's some stuff to go through. But yeah, the world is on my neck, so I cannot have my home on my neck too, right? So I'll say that for my family holds me in high regard. My husband makes sure of that. And so I don't know that I'll ever have grandchildren one day, but I sure look forward to being that because I already feel that in my own home. And now, unfortunately, certainly not because of incarceration or because of absence, my family really didn't experience that in the same way that I know you are talking about. And that's because my mother was from Florida. She really didn't have a lot of family that was here. I never really knew my grandmother on my mother's side. My father's mother, who I was close to and loved her dearly, passed away when I was in the 3rd grade. I didn't have that. And then my own mother died at 56, right? So when you talk about somebody who is a Black woman who is lacking in some of those experiences, I just am. Am.
Interesting.
So our experiences are not the same, but I will say that
I have to commend you all the more for being interested in and foregrounding ageism, because so many people's way into the field, including Dr. Robert Butler, who invented the word, was raised by his grandparents. It's us over and over. It's because of my grandmother. It's because of my grandparents. It was having a strong older model typically in the family. And it's sad that we have to rely on the biological family. It should be everywhere around us in our, age diverse communities that I hope we'll have more of in the future. But that you came to this awareness without having day-to-day contact with grandparents is especially commendable. I mean, I came to it because I was terrified of getting old. It wasn't my grandparents who did it, but I had to get old first.
Wow. I didn't, and you know what? So how eye-opening is that too? That you were at one point yourself thinking negatively.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah. No.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what else we got here. I'm just going to put up a couple of these. And remember, the Discomfort Club does not happen without you all. So we are asking you to join in. We can't be the only one talking about stuff that's uncomfortable, okay? We don't want to be uncomfortable by ourselves. So if you have questions, if you have comments, go ahead and ask them here. Let me see. Kathy Hagan. Kathy, hi, Kathy. Kathy says, all people want to look good, though. So talking about ageism. If I get dressed up for a special event, I'm okay with people telling me I look good. Okay, men want to look good too. They do. Not sure I'm ready to give that up. I'm just saying, okay, that's me neither.
Totally fair. And I think the impulse to adorn ourselves is human. It's been there since the first, person in Africa painted the first bead, or whatever, or put on the first piece of jewelry. The problem is that it is so gendered. And because, broadly speaking, men age well by continuing to move like younger versions of themselves and being strong and active. And women age well by continuing to look like younger versions of themselves. I mean, the look piece is part of it for all genders, of course, but that is sort of the dominant narrative. So if it's, if it's applied equally, yes, we get into trouble, of course, when we compare ourselves. My grandmother, speaking of grandmothers, had a great phrase, and I think of it about 8 times a day. She didn't make it up, but comparisons are odious. Comparing yourself to anyone is a fool's game. One thing we do, we walk in the room, I do it too. And who looks better? Who looks thinner? Who looks younger? Rank people. Now I'm so often the oldest person in the room, and it's like, I'm not used to that. I'm like, oh, dang. And how do I feel about that? And why am I feeling funny about it? But
I think the questioning,
we all compare. The problem is when we add value to the comparison, right?
yes. And I think the questioning of ourselves also keeps us honest. I think so many people do not know themselves. And when the uncomfortable thoughts come up, the uncomfortable experience comes up, so often we want to shut it down. And I'm like, live there for a minute. So
With the cloudy water.
yes. And thinking about how I feel about ageism, when you say you go into a room and you're sort of looking, right? Before you know it, maybe you're comparing yourself. What I have been finding myself doing for the last several years is wondering who looks their age. Why is that my business? It's not.
No,
And do I
but
look
I wonder
do I
all
look
the
my
time.
age in comparison? Yeah, I don't
I
like it though. I shouldn't be doing that. And it's ageist. And
what
why
is
do I care?
But I mean, it's okay and in fact unrealistic not to notice age, just as it is. I mean, I have learned to notice when everyone in the room is male or female, when everyone is white.
Mhm.
I still spend most of my time in predominantly white spaces, and I wonder what it is like to be the only Asian person, to be the only Black person. And I'm not successful at getting much further than posing the question. And I don't think their reality is ever knowable, but just training ourselves to notice it is a step.
Yes.
And then if you are in a position to call it out, say, how come, how come everyone is, 12 on this committee? Um, you know, it's if you can do that without jeopardizing, without running, a professional risk to yourself, but you can't do it, back to discomfort, and expect to
Mhm.
not have it be uncomfortable. It is hard when someone says something ageist or racist or anythingist. You have to screw up your courage. It's easier to say nothing. And and then, well, I could go on forever. There are ways to do it. You're going to put your foot in your mouth. Some people are going to tell you, be defensive, blah, blah, blah. But if we stay in our comfort zones, nothing changes, because those people are never alerted to their own bias. And we circle back to, you can't challenge bias unless you're aware of it.
Yes. And so that just brings me to the work that I'm doing too. With something that I have been very aware of is how many folks are talking about inclusion and not talking about bias. You can't. You cannot have a real conversation about inclusion, okay? And creating this environment that is purposefully welcoming and of all people. You can't do that when you are not even willing to recognize your own bias and how the room looks today and why it looks the way it looks today. If there is an absence of diversity in age, in race and ethnicity, in all of the ways, we have to be willing to ask ourselves, how come it is this way and how come it persists in being this way? And there's a discomfort again. Somebody's got to be able to ask the question, but first somebody's got to be willing to see it. All the discomfort things. Let me see. I see a long comment here, and I'm going to post it, and I'm just going to read it as it is.
Right.
Mimi, Ashton, you brought up an interesting point about not telling other women they look good, commenting on their appearance. But so often that's how we lift other women up. Rather than not saying anything at all, we need to lift each other. I think she's saying lift each other up about things that are not physical and more about who the individual is as a good human being.
Snap. I
Thank you,
just
Mimi.
learned something in the context of a Japanese cultural thing where, and I'm going to mangle it, so don't quote me directly, but instead of you saying, you're a good student, or, say, praise the effort. You really studied hard for that test. You really worked hard on your ball game. Praise, instead of praising a fixed attribute of the person, praise the effort or knowledge or whatever that brought them to it. So I think that that's a really good point, Mimi. We do say it to lift each other up, but I do think it's also problematic. So what could we say that reinforces something that person did or a skill they brought to, which is why they, look the way they do, why we look good when we're confident. That is the biggest aphrodisiac there is, for sure. Or, what I'm thinking of, is it Brene Brown and her power poses or whatever, that's what makes us look good. It's not how old we are, how well or badly we put our makeup on. Yeah. So what is the thing the person learned or did or manifested that makes us think they look good?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Not that I've
I
mastered
think
this.
no, I think being explicit in why you appreciate somebody or what you like about them that has nothing to do with their physical attributes. I just think again we're in a period of unlearning, right? Because
When we
that's
said
what we do.
who they are, right?
Yeah,
Who they are, what their what their skills are, what they've done, rather than
yeah,
how they appear in this fixed moment.
yeah. Oh, we're already at 2:05. Okay, let me see here. I'm going back up. There's so many things. Lori, Lori has another one up here. She says, I think a lot of white folks worry about making mistakes and exploring their allyship. Yes. Doing or saying the wrong thing and offending someone, then not being able to recover with them. Let me say something about that.
Please do.
Yes, that's what happens. But the whole thing is, an advocacy is not about centering yourself. And when you center your own comfort, or you center your fear, even right, of getting it wrong, you're getting it wrong. That's getting it wrong, is in centering yourself. That's getting it wrong. So some people will say, there's a right way to do it and there's not a right way to do it and there's not a wrong way, but there is. There are ways that you can do it wrong that really hurt the people that you say you are an ally to, that you say you are advocating for.
Can you give
And
an
so
example?
I think that's a really good example to say privately, okay, to say privately, I am an ally, okay, or to even declare it publicly. But then when the occasion arises for you to speak up and say something in support or shutting down even discrimination, or even in having conversations like this, you are so afraid of saying the wrong thing that you say nothing at all. That is not helpful, and that is centering yourself. That is self. That is ego. I don't want to get it wrong. I am afraid of how I will say it and how it will make somebody else feel, but in how it makes them feel is how it makes me feel. We have to get past that, get into the murk. You might say something wrong. You can almost guarantee you will say something wrong. I am learning about other communities that I am not a part of. I say things wrong. Say
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
apologize, move on, ask for forgiveness, say thank you for your time and teaching me. And when somebody tells you you've done something wrong, guaranteed, even when you don't like their delivery, they did you a favor. And so that's the way to think about it. They did you a favor because they could not tell you anything. Like I sat in workplaces for years, okay, and didn't say anything. I gave people rope because there was no relationship building there. There was no trust. So it's really hard to have these uncomfortable conversations, and we're not going to have them if we prioritize our own comfortability.
And especially if white people, as members of the majority culture, center our whiteness,
Yeah.
which is so easy to do. We've grown up surrounded by it. It's such a baked in default, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we I mean, one thing I will say is that if you are, I don't mean to sound preachy, God, but if your intention is really serious to, increase equity, when someone corrects you, a person of color, queer person, whatever, two things happen. You never forget it, perhaps because of
Mm.
that flush of shame or embarrassment or anger or defensiveness, and that but the good news is you never forget that lesson.
Yeah.
And I am really grateful, and I think anyone who showed up at this call is like me in this regard. I am genuinely grateful and a little proud of myself that at least I have a relationship with this person that is authentic enough for
Yes.
them to take the risk. The risk is always greater for them than it is for me,
Yes.
inherently. That they trust me enough to say, yo, that was not okay. And
Mm.
I go through the flush of anger and upset, and sometimes it'll last a while, but coming out the other end, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so grateful, and also super glad that that this relationship with this person is now stronger.
Yes. I always say like it really is It is a gift for somebody to tell you when you have made an error, when you have said something that is hurtful, that is harmful. Thank you, Ryan. Um, because you might not have known that, right? And
Yeah.
so part of the discomfort again is in, how am I going to know if I said something wrong? You might
I
not.
have learned a lot of this from Ryan Backer, who just commented, who is a
Nice.
co-creator along with me of the Old School Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse,
Nice.
oldschool.info, tons of free anti-ageist resources. And they have such a gentle way. They corrected me once about something I said about an ally, a woman of color who I thought she was doing good work, but it wasn't the way. I can't even, this is like flinch worthy to say out loud, but I will, I wish she would center different things, and it's her experience. That was completely inappropriate of me to say. Luckily, I only said it to Ryan. And they said gently after a day, that didn't sit well with me. And that was such a gentle course correction. And it left me some time to think about, I trust Ryan's internal compass. They've been doing anti-racist work they're significantly younger than I am and have been doing anti-racist work for longer than me. And I was like, okay, they're onto something. And that's a way you can do it that isn't like, you screwed up, I'm not your friend anymore, but just to say, want to think about that again.
Yeah. So I think that's really important. And I also think too, I think about the work that we both do. And I think about when I am working with folks, I'm always sharing with them my experience as a Black woman, right? And so I think there's also something to be said about, it's not always my story to share, right? When I share something, I am sharing it from my experience as a Black woman. And so it's going to be really uncomfortable for people sometimes. And so the right answer is not always, can you talk about something else? Or can you say it a little more gently, right? Because again, then we center the work around white people. Okay. So
I need a little more on that.
So I think about how sometimes one of the biggest blessings about me being my own boss is I get to say yes and no, right? So I don't work with everybody, I don't. And there's like certain criteria internally that I know is really important for me. And so when I share the content that I'll be covering, if somebody says, first of all, if they say something like, we want to start in the middle, okay, we want to start with middle management, or we want to start at the front line, already not my client. Goodbye. Because I know we got to start at the top, because the people who are the decision makers and probably who need to hear these things most are people in positions of leadership and authority. And guess what? Most of them do not look like me. So you need the lesson and you need the learning, not the people in the middle, not the people in the front. Of course, they will get their learning as well, but it starts with you. And so when people say to me, well, can we not talk about racism because I don't think we really have a problem with that? Or can we not center so much about microaggression because I don't think we have a problem with that? What they're saying is, I don't think we want to talk about that because it makes people uncomfortable, especially Ayana, because you are I'm very casual in my approach, as you already know. Okay. So I show up and I say what I say and I do what I do because it comes from the heart. I don't have a script. And so if you don't like that I say, white people have work to do in the workplace, and you want me to say it in a more gentle way, then I know you're not ready, because you are centering the people who usually in these situations are aggressors. Okay. They are the folks who perpetuate inequality in the workplace. So to ask me to say it in a gentle way so that they get it, they wouldn't get it no matter how I said it.
What's your best response to something I hear a lot, which is that they didn't mean it, or I didn't mean it? The comment, the microaggression, I think microaggressions are by definition sort of unintended. They're sort of casual. People don't, and you may want to define it better than I do. A comment about someone's race or age or gender, that is not a compliment, but that may be intended as one. He meant it as a compliment. What do you say to that?
It depends on the day. It depends on the day. But I do address it, and I teach people how to address it. And there are a number of ways that you want to say something. And so sometimes I want to go back to the workplace, because sometimes if it happens in the workplace, you may find yourself, especially if you are a person from a marginalized community, you may not find yourself in a position where you can speak up.
Yeah.
Where you can say, this made me feel uncomfortable and this was inappropriate and this is why. That's part of the problem, is people do not have the freedom to say what needs to be said. And so this type of behavior continues.
And
And
that's
so
why it's so important for white people to speak up, because we are less vulnerable.
yes,
Go on.
yes. So I always say in the workplace, there has to be someone that you can speak up to. And to me, HR is not always the first place you should go, especially if you are trying to create an environment where somebody learns from their mistake. Have a conversation. Again, what you said made me feel this kind of way. This is why what you said was inappropriate. And again, I do not put the responsibility on the person who has been the aggrieved to, you got to say it gently, and you said something that was inappropriate. It hurt my feelings. And you may not have known that what you said was inappropriate, but it is. I want to give you an example. Okay. And then I'm going to put up some more comments because I see them here. One example that I can give, first of all, I want to talk about microaggressions. Yes, there's sort of these everyday slights. They can be comments, but they can be actions too, okay? They can be actions. They can even be items. If you think about like the Confederate flag, that sends a message. It is called a micro assault. That is purposeful, okay? That is intentionally inflammatory. But when people say, nah, I'm gonna ruffle some feathers. Remember, this is the Discomfort Club, y'all, and y'all are a part of it.
Came out of my mouth 5 minutes ago. Go on.
When people say, very well meaning, okay, I don't see color, that is a microaggression. It is a micro invalidation. I just talked about this yesterday. This is a micro invalidation. And why is it a micro invalidation? Why should I take offense to it? Because when you say very well meaningly, okay, I don't see color, what you're also telling me is that you do not see me. Not fully, not the way I am, not the way I show up, not the way I am in my family or with my friends. You do not see color. That means you also will not see the unique circumstances in which I live in this country and in your workplace. You won't see them because you refuse to see them, right? It's a micro invalidation. So how do I respond to that? If somebody says that to me, I say, well, I hope you do see my color because it's who I am. So if you don't see my color, you don't see me. And you certainly won't be able to understand what I'm trying to tell you when my life is different. So when I tell you I can't do small talk, Ashton, I can't. Okay.
No, a useful phrase in that context that I learned is if you can't see race, and to nitpick, race is a social construct, but if you can't see the color of someone's skin, then you can't see racism. You can't see,
right.
And we see this language around age and ageism. You're ageless, right? Yeah. You look so young. And that strips, I mean, my friends are also gun shy. They're like, happy birthday. Did I screw up?
Nobody says anything. We're just like, hey, girl.
Right. But age is real. Being old is different from being young. Being black is different from being white. Being black and wealthy is different from being black and poor. White, same, right? Yes. And we need to acknowledge these differences and respect them, because that's where our lived experience is grounded in, and so on. The problem that I've learned to get clear about this is when we ascribe a value to that. And the classic one is young must be better, right? Mm-hmm. But it should be out there. We should be able to say how old we are without someone thinking, oh, that's, the minute we hear a number, all sorts of associations click into place for me too, right? Yeah. I'm not invulnerable. I mean, I have another radical friend, different person, who refuses to give her age. She is a woman, but she said, I don't want people, it's not so she can appear younger. She does not want to allow people to pigeonhole her. Wow. It's sort of like, do you claim old or not? Everyone's approach is different. In my universe, we would proudly say, I'm 70, but that would be a neutral thing. People would not go, oh my God, she's so old, or she looks X for her age, or whatever. It would just be part of what I am, the way I'm right-handed, and I live in Brooklyn. And even right-handedness, it's a world made for right-handed people.
It sure is, isn't it?
Well, nothing is safe.
It's a man's world. It's a right-handed, listen, not just the man's world, a white right-handed man's world. You see what I'm fighting against, girl? It's too much. Okay, let me see. We've got such great comments. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Listen, before I forget, because we've only got 10 minutes left, this conversation really flew by. If you want to see more of these conversations, this is our first one just because we like to gab. We didn't know what this was going to turn into, but it won't turn.
I was a little nervous about it. I mean, yeah.
No, this is good. This is really good. So if you want to continue to see this kind of content, you want to engage with us, you want to have these conversations with us, go ahead and message me on LinkedIn, and you can give me your email. I promise not to spam you because I don't got time for that. Okay. I won't do that.
Promise.
But I will certainly let you know when we're going to have LinkedIn Lives. And again, I want to hear from you. So I'm going to put up another comment here that just came through again, Mimi. When I hear people say, I don't see color, I respond by saying, I understand why they may think that is a good thing and what their intentions are in saying that, but I further explain the implication of what they're saying. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's encouraged, right? To call somebody out when they're trying to be kind.
Is neutral, or even in that case, maybe you're extending a hand. You're saying, I know you're recognizing good intentions. A really good all-purpose rejoinder when you can't think of the appropriate framing is just in a neutral tone, if you can manage it. What do you mean by that? I don't see color. What do you mean?
Yeah.
I don't feel old. What does old feel like?
Yes.
Just think, if you can think of a neutral way to get the person to reflect on what they just said, ideally without being defensive.
Yeah.
It's going to be uncomfortable. You are challenging them.
I want to ask you about a certain word. Okay. And talking about older folks. Okay. And I say older folks. I say older people. I say older folks. More and more
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with anything. I mean, except the elderly.
Oh, okay. That's the word, Ash. I can't stand elderly. I hate it. I hate elderly. I hate frail, like all of these.
The worst thing, elderly should be an okay word to be wonky about it. The biggest problem with elderly is the in front of it, because it implies that older people belong to some, formless, gloopy group, when nothing scientifically and biologically could be further from the truth, because the longer we live, the more different from one another we become. All stereotypes are misinformed and baseless, but 7-year-olds or 27-year-olds have far more in common socially, developmentally, economically, blah blah blah, than old people. So we do not, you don't wake up one day old and everything's gone to hell and you're just like everyone else who has the same birthday. The elderly has connotations of frailty. And I think it triggers some fears in us of physical and cognitive decline, which is actually ableism, not ageism, but that's a topic for another day.
Like this, layered, right? On top of each other.
But that is, I think, where our deepest fears reside. And I think that's why we tend to have such a strong reaction to the word, because it just connotes, a bunch of frail, really old people hunched over, walking around and helpless, and all these, which is true of some older people, but not true of everyone, right?
Yes.
And it has much more to do with class and luck than it does with biological age.
Now, listen, we talked about how it's hard to talk about ageism. It's very hard to talk about classism, right?
There's no class in America, Ayana.
Right. So that's going to bring me to, I can't believe we have 5 minutes left. Again, thank you all so much for being here. I want us to end here. Okay. Because we're talking about them already. Some of the ichs. So if any of you like TikTok as much as I do, by the way, TikTok is a wealth of learning. Okay. If you are like me and you are learning about and from different communities that you do not have personal and close access to, I think that TikTok is one of the best places to be, because there are so many brilliant creators there who are sharing their stories. So right now there's a trend. What's your ick? Like, what's the thing that grosses you out? What's the thing that you're just like, ugh, barf, you know? So in thinking about the kind of work you do, okay, around really ending ageism, what's your ick about the industry, about your field? Do you have one?
I would say my ick is the assumption that older people are icky.
Okay.
I mean, I call it age cooties, that
Oh.
somehow, and it is primarily, I think, because of our association of aging, which is not something sad or pathetic or icky that old people
Yeah.
do. Aging is how we move through life. Everyone is aging. But there is this recoiling, especially around the idea of old people being naked or sexual, God forbid.
Oh. Yeah,
That,
we're like, oh, old people
yeah,
have sex. What? I
or
hope so.
yeah, right. Why should we
Yeah.
stop if we want to keep going and have the opportunity? But
Right.
that is my ick.
Okay. That's a pretty good ick. It is. I mean, it's icky. It's very icky. I'll tell you the ick about my industry, my field, and the passion I have for the work that I'm doing around DEI advocacy, specifically in the workplace. My ick is that even though we are really trying to get to a place where people understand equity, okay, where workplaces are both diverse and inclusive, and that's something that you have to engineer. It does not happen overnight. It's not something that happens naturally. You have to sort of do some things. But in talking specifically about equity, my ick is that this industry, this field, I should say, is also very elitist to me, because I feel like in order to do this work in the places you need to do them in corporate structures, in even in large nonprofits, in order to get in front of boards and executive teams, you have to have access. And sometimes access has to do with money. Can you afford certain associations? Can you afford getting into certain clubs that allow you to network? And so my ick is that even in the work that I'm doing that is really seeking to be more equitable, it is a bit elitist. And just always trying to find my way around that. And there are ways to do it, but the work always continues. It does.
Yeah, sometimes you need the help of people in power to get access to the people in power. Because as you say, if people with the ability to enforce change don't embody it and enforce it, it's just lip service. It's just, a workshop that makes people feel good, and then nothing changes.
Yeah, right. Yes. Another one. People will get into a process of learning, and the learning feels good. They never move from learning to doing. I'm specifically working with some of my client partners on that right now. How do we move from a place of learning? Learning feels good, and you should be learning, right? But you've got to do something with that knowledge. Don't just hoard it and only talk about it in your board meetings, or, how are you making sure that DEI advocacy in all of its many ways is done like this and not, over here somewhere, this one place that we're doing it. It's got to be everywhere. I want to share Mimi's ick. She says, is opposite side of ageism. The explicit biases toward young workers, too broad brush of this generation and that generation. Yes.
It's all ageism. And I have we'll talk about, if there's a next one, about why I really think the word generation should be banished from the workplace entirely.
Ashton, you're radical. I like it though. You're like, ban it all, doggone it. Okay, I'm down with it.
You know what? I'm self-employed. I can't get fired, and I have a lot of privilege, and that means I can do that without worrying about my livelihood. And that's a huge luxury. And I do know that.
I understand that, which I'm going to close by saying this. I'm so glad that you said that, because I think the reason we get to do the work we get to do in the way that we get to do it is because I'm responsible to myself and to my family as a business owner, right? I don't think I could ever do this kind of work that I'm doing today in the way that I do it 10 years ago.
Oh gosh.
Maybe even 5 years ago.
No.
in a corporate structure. Yes, here's the book.
You see?
Here is the book.
If I put weren't covering their names and we're better at mirror writing.
Okay. And both of them are, again, Regina Jackson. I think it's Sarah.
Sarah?
But I could be saying it wrong.
Oh, God, I screwed up.
I might be, please correct me.
I don't know why these people have such weird names. That was the microaggression.
Microaggression. There it is. And guess what? It shows up. Our biases. I tell people who are looking at resumes and trying to build their teams, your bias shows up.
I did it just the other day, talking about how Thai names are really strange and have all these syllables. And she said, strange to whom?
That part. Yeah. See, but even the discomfort feels good sometimes because you're like, yes, just learn something. Ashton, thank you so much.
A pleasure, Ayana. Thank you for organizing this. Thank you, everyone who showed up. Let us know if you want to show up to another one. And please feed us your questions and your issues, because it's a pretty sad club if we're the only 2 people in it.
Okay, it can't just be the 2 of us. So please, we want to hear your questions, and we want to make sure that we continue doing this. So Ashton, you know what? Do you want to tell them about office hours really quick on our way out?
Oh, sure. Office Hours is an open to anyone session hosted by the Old School Clearinghouse at oldschool.info. And if you look on our About page, you will see the link. We talk about anything ageism related. The 2 co-founders and I, every Wednesday, 1:30 p.m. ET.
Okay, and there it is. Thank you so much. I see all of the comments coming through. I appreciate all of you for being here, and I hope you're at our next one. Stay tuned. Bye, everybody.